Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brothers and sisters, welcome to today's seminar titled Faith and Finance. We've got two guest speakers with us, and I'm going to introduce both of them. And I think you'll agree that we've got the right people to talk about the right topics, and we've got the right people attending it. Sitting next to me is Ibrahim Khan. So Ibrahim is the CEO of the Islamic Finance Guru and Curate. Both of those are projects that were started in order to try and empower the Muslims in the UK and to give them opportunities to make their money, wealth, and social position improve. He's a graduate of Oxford University and has a master's in Islamic finance. He's previously worked as a solicitor, particularly in corporate industries in London, and he's a well-recognized face in the Islamic finance world. Next to him is Ziad Chaudhry, who studied at UCL subjects of history, politics, and economics. He's worked with the Office of National Statistics and done a property internship in London, and has previously worked as a business consultant for a $2 billion company. So I think both of them have both the insights, the education, the knowledge and qualifications to be presenting on the topics that they're going to be presenting on. So I'm going to pass the mic on to Ibrahim, who will take the rest of the evening.
Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's fantastic to be here in Walsall. I remember coming here a long, long time ago when my dad almost moved to Walsall. And I don't know if it was his good fortune or his misfortune, unfortunately, he didn't settle here. And he's now moved over to Blackpool. But it's nice to see, a masjid that's really thriving, and a community that's clearly very active. So congratulations to all of you for that. What we're going to cover today is essentially a boot camp on halal investing, how you can grow your money in a halal way, but also crucially how we can take this resource that we have of wealth and arc it in the direction of the akhirah, how we can actually excel in the akhirah, because that's actually why we should be here for this conversation. So on the Day of Judgment, there are 5 things that we will be questioned about before we are even allowed to move from our places. And of those things, 2 of them are how we earned our wealth and how we spent it. If I could see a show of hands for everyone who is currently working. Okay, so there's lots of people working. I think in Birmingham the hit rate of employment is a little bit lower, but I guess in Walsall, mashallah, you guys are working hard, which is fantastic. I'm intrigued if the tax is matching up with the working, but we won't go into that. So you're working really hard, and you're making sure that your risk is halal. You're making sure that the job that you're doing is perfectly permissible, ideally. But then what ends up happening is that we think of our economic relationships, or we think of our money stuff as just as our job. And then outside of the job, that's basically the end of it. We don't think about where our money then ends up sitting. We don't think about what's happening with that money and whether or not that's halal or not. And actually, if we think about the purpose of life for us, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He talks about وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I did not create jinn and mankind except but to worship me, except but to put what He wants before what we want, except but to bow down to Him and be subservient to Him in everything, right? And that also includes our wealth. If I could invite you, if anyone seen those Ray-Ban glasses that Mark Zuckerberg keeps on wearing? Has anyone seen those? Yeah. So when you put those on, you see the world apparently in a different way. And if I invite you now to put those Mark Zuckerberg Ray-Ban Meta glasses on, and you look at the world and you see the economic relationships around you, I see that there are people here with, a bank balance associated with them. There's all of this masjid. Every single physical thing costs money. There are economic relationships between you and the masjid and the employers and the employees, and between you and your family. Money is constantly crisscrossing. Each of the assets, each of the pieces of clothing that you're wearing are actually, at some point, they originated as an economic transaction. And so if we forget all of this, when we think about getting to our akhirah, it's like we are forgetting a very, very fundamental part of life, which is the economic aspect of it. And we're going to talk a little bit later on about boycotting and how the Israel-Palestine conflict and the genocide that's been ongoing there, how that plays out for us and what that means for us from a financial perspective. But one thing that I wanted to mention to all of us now is this is actually, we feel a lot of hurt, we feel a lot of anger, and we feel incapable of being able to do very much about it. And yet when we think about our actions, we can sometimes end up actually doing the exact opposite of our feelings. So if I could see a show of hands, who's been on a protest over the last 2 years? Yeah. Now, the irony is that many of us who would go on these protests, their money that is sat there. So on the Saturday afternoon, they went for the protest, but they earned all of that wealth over the week. That money ends up sat in two different places. Either it's sat in a bank, or it is sat in investments. And for the majority of people, those investments, just because of the way the investment world is, it will be sat in US tech stocks. So either you're giving your money for the use and privilege and benefit of HSBC, Barclays, NatWest, Santander, or you will be giving it to Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, and the like. That's frankly what's actually happening. And so on the one side, we are taking actions such as protesting, but on the other side, our wealth is actually directly feeding the very infrastructure that we are campaigning against, right? And so this conversation that we're going to have today is, sure, it's about making money, it's about investing in halal way, it's about growing our wealth, but actually there's an even more important part to this, which is that we as Muslims have a responsibility with our actions, but also our wealth and also our charity to create a world that we actually want to live in. We need to make sure that it's not just talk, but it's also action. And the key way that we do that is, if anyone here from Multan or Saadabad or Rahim Yar Khan or any Punjab kind of area, yeah, okay, mashallah, yeah, fantastic. So it's fantastic mangoes, by the way, in that region, absolutely amazing mangoes, if ever you get to go to Pakistan. So in that area, so I'm from Karachi originally, from the city. And so I'd never seen a blade of grass before until I went out into Punjab. And there you see, it's called the chuck, right? That's what they call the farm area. And you see these canals that are being built out, and then you see the pipes that come off the canals and they go into the fields. And then sometimes there's arguments over that, and sometimes people cut the canal, the pipes, and then people get into issues because of that. Why do they do that? Well, the reason why they do that is because the water, wherever that flows into whichever field it flows, that's the field that grows. And so the question is, where does our wealth flow, right? Is it flowing towards the banks or the Elon Musks of the world, or are there ways that we can create pipes that flow back into our community. Why is it that Khalid or Farid or Farida or Maryam's wealth is going from Walsall, from this Muslim community, and basically ending up there, as opposed to actually coming back into this community? Because if we are not going to invest in our community, then no one else is, right? And then, of course, the final thing that we're going to be discussing is that it helps Muslims get wealthier and more prosperous as well. So a little bit of a detour, and to give you some context on how we started all of this. Some Islamic finance guru. So my background is I studied at Oxford, did PPE, did a master's in Islamic finance, did my alim course started in Leicester. And then ended up finishing it with Sheikh Akram Nadwi. And Islamic Finance Guru started off basically as a labor of love, as a blog, just to organize our own thoughts. And then the whole thing snowballed. And the mission has always been, how can we help our community level up financially? It's all about those pipes. How can we create those pipes to go back into our own community so that it doesn't leak out? And then how does that actually end up growing the pot as a whole? And we do that through two main things. One is, which is what we're doing today, which is the education arm, which is called Islamic Finance Guru. We reach around 4 million or so people every month. We've got a YouTube channel, Instagram, which I didn't know how to use until someone taught me. And we put out lots of content, and you can benefit from that. It's perfectly free. And then we've got an investment arm, which is called Curate Capital, and that actually helps investors make some of those investments. So today, really, the purpose is more of an educational piece. It's more with the IFG hat on that we'll be doing the majority of this conversation. And then we've written a book, Halal Investing for Beginners, which you can, if you want to at some point, you can look on Amazon, you can scan the QR code. It's had people like Sheikh Yasir Qadi and Sheikh Haytham Al-Haddad and Mufti Faraz Adam and others who have said nice things about it. Okay. So I'm now going to take a break. I'm going to hand over to the wonderful Ziad, who's going to take you through the basics of personal finance. And then what's coming up is that we're going to go through a little bit about the theory of investing. And then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of what kind of things you can actually invest in and how should you think about creating your investment portfolio. So personal finance, a little bit more detail on personal finance, theory of investing, and then practical investing stuff. And then we'll have Q&A at the end of it. Does that make sense? Fantastic. Over to you.
I can just hold it. Hey, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brothers and sisters, it's Friday night and we've got Ibrahim Khan, the Islamic finance guru here. We need some more energy in the room. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Much better. I'm just going to come straight in and ask some questions. So, who here thinks they know what personal finance is? Don't be shy, otherwise I'm just going to pick on brothers in the front row or sisters. Any ideas on maybe what personal finance could be? Gonna go, yes. Management of wealth loan, yes, absolutely. Any other ideas? One more brother. I'm just going to shoot a sort of grenade at the front.
Trying to make it go as far as it can.
Trying to make it go as far as it can, absolutely. One thing that we might say would be our income, so things that come into our account, maybe our jobs, maybe our businesses, our income, and then we'd subtract our expenditure, so our outgoings, things that flow out of our account, maybe our rent, maybe our food, groceries, bills, all that sorts of things. And then that number at the end, after our income minus our expenditure, would be our savings. So one way we look at personal finance is through that sort of formula. Now, if your income is less than your expenditure, means something's going wrong. And then probably most of the rest of the slides don't mean too much if we are struggling with that first line. And as much as I, sort of joke about it, and we all say we know these things, there are a lot of people that live in sort of overdrafts and where their formula is going wrong. And it's important to just break things down. Can I reduce my expenditure? And can I raise my income just through doing little things? So it's important that we keep that in the community, inshallah. So I'll just move on to the sort of 4 tiers of personal finance. So as I said, the sort of first part would be clearing your short-term debts. You know, that's sort of like you're in the red. Things aren't going too well. You've got things you owe, maybe overdrafts, these types of things. The first thing you should do is not buy a car when you get a bit of income. It's try and clear off your short-term debts. Then you can work to build that 3 to 6 month savings buffer. Again, this is something people forget. As soon as they sort of get in the green, we then think, okay, yeah, I can spend on X, Y, and Z. But it's important to have that rainy day fund, that money to give you access in case anything goes wrong, you know, tie your camel sort of thing. Then getting on to the property ladder. Does anyone here know what inflation is? Come on, brothers, we all know what inflation is. Just anyone, quick hand.
Increasing the supply of amount of money supply.
Yes, definitely. Increasing the amount of money supply, meaning the cost of items, everything, like a basket of goods, increases, right? So some of the uncles may know how much did bread cost in the early 2000s? Anyone? How much was milk maybe 20 years ago, or where they first moved to Walsall? Any answers for how much milk was back in the day? I think it was sorry? 30p, exactly. Now it's what? Approaching, 120 here. Oh, mashallah. London is approaching £2. Maybe I need to come to Walsall. So yeah, as cost goes up, that means assets go up. So if as Muslims, we do not own assets, we will get, as time goes on, poorer than our counterparts. So it's very important that we as Muslims try and get on the property ladder as early as possible, because assets rise with inflation. And the more, if we look around the world and the climate, US dollar, the GDP, when COVID happened, what happened? We had furlough. So much money was printed. So much money was printed. When money gets printed, the supply goes up, as the brother said, which means costs go up. The only things that go up when the money supply goes up is the assets. So it's really, really important that we invest in our assets, bricks, mortar, these types of things. And then subhanAllah, on the money that is left over from that, we should definitely be investing. And that sort of segues nicely into our next slide. The sort of personal finance timeline. Now, if you just look here, you've got sort of, child, university, first job, marriage. There's a story that Ibrahim likes to tell that I'm going to steal right now. So if we just look at the marriage section, the average, actually I'm going to tell it with his story first. Ibrahim was once in Bradford and he saw a Lamborghini. And his first thought, his words not mine, was drug dealer. Then another Lamborghini comes past. And then he thought, maybe mafia, like drug dealers, multiple of them. Then another one went past. And another one, and another one, and another one. And it turns out it was a Desi wedding. The average spend of a Desi wedding, according to Islamic finance gurus research, is, guess how much?
50K.
50K. Bang on. Spot on. First try. Congratulations, sister. 50K. Who wants to guess what the average British person spend is on a wedding?
20?
22, yeah, it's 20 to 25 to 30,000 pounds. So 25 to 30,000 pounds. So the average Muslim, I think there is a stat that we are performing below economically. Yeah, our weddings, mashallah, double the cost. Something's probably going wrong there. Another thing that I'd like to quickly point to is if you look at birth, you look at JISA, Junior ISAs. Does anyone know what an ISA is? Anyone know what ISA stands for? Yeah, individual savings account. Yeah, exactly. If we was to ask that question, it may be run with a different demographic or people who have been in England for centuries. Everyone knows what an ISA is. In our communities, instead of maybe doing extremely lavish birthday parties with, fancy cars and all these things, can we start thinking about investing in ISAs for our children? Ibrahim loves to mention something where if you save £50 a month for your child when they're born, by the time they're 18, it covers their university fees. How amazing is that, subhanAllah? It's these types of things that, we all know these things, right? Everyone knows this, but if it takes the Islamic finance guru to come to the masjid and remind you that doing these little savings things, investing in, whether it be various different Sharia compliant things for your children, by the time they are my age and they're 23, they won't be worried about the economic climate, they won't be worried about their university fees, they won't be worried about getting riddled with debt because, their parents invested in halal ways that compounded, which we'll talk about later on. Now I'm going to pass back to my Ustad, Ibrahim.
Jazakallah khair, Ziyad. Okay, so hands up who has a pension and who doesn't have a pension. It's all right. Don't be worried. I won't pick on you. So a third of Muslims in the UK, they don't have a pension. Now the issue with that is what? What happens if you don't have a pension? What's that?
Tax more.
You tax. Yeah. Okay. So kind of. So the employer has to contribute in to your pension, so they match your pension. So you basically get free money, and then you also get tax benefits on top of that. So it's almost like you're getting a tax benefit as opposed to ending up paying more in tax, if that makes sense. Any other thoughts? Why would we want to have a pension?
Longer.
Sorry?
You'll be working longer.
Yeah. So we all like to think that, inshallah, God willing, our children will look after us when we come to retire. But we also need to have our own sustenance. And if we don't have that, then unfortunately, we're going to be struggling. There are literally pensioners that are today in the UK who are in poverty because they don't have enough as part of their pension. And so it's really important to make sure that you get yourself onto the pension. It's free money that your employer is giving you as well. And if you're part of the public sector, anyone who works for the public sector, for the government here, so anyone in the public sector, your kind of pension is called the defined benefit pension or a final salary scheme pension, and that's perfectly permissible according to the majority of scholars, particularly people like Mufti Zubair Butt, Qalam and other Sharia panels, because it's just seen as a deferred salary. And then everyone else, your pension is linked to the underlying investments that you're making. So what you need to do is make sure that you're invested in Islamic funds. And the easy way to find that is literally find the list of funds out there for your pension provider, whether that's Aviva or Scottish Widows or whoever it might be. And there's literally just search Islamic. And you will probably find one fund. Unfortunately, there's not many funds. And if you just invest in that, that will at least ensure that your investment is Sharia compliant. Okay, so I'm going to quickly set up the theory of investing. And then Ziyad is going to give you a few practical examples of this. So the theory of investing is based on knowing what it is that you're about to get yourself into. And what I mean by this is when we go on a journey, we get into our car and we put on Google Maps, like I did in Manchester, and I pressed, whatever the postcode for here was, and I came here. We had a direction and we went there. Unfortunately, when it comes to investing, we don't think like that for some reason. Our typical investment approach, instead of having a game plan about what we're doing, is often something like, oh, my cousin Zakaria just invested in this, bro, you should look into this. This is really good. This cryptocurrency. Or, oh, Uncle Nasser across the road has just got into property. Maybe I should start looking into property. That's how we think about investing. But that's not us putting ourselves in the driving seat of where we want to go with our investment journey. We're not Uncle Nasir. We're not Zakaria. We are who we are. And our investment plan needs to be specific to us. So we need to ask ourselves a few very fundamental questions. The first question is, why is it that we are investing? We've got, let's say, £20,000 that we've saved up. What is it that we want to do with this? How old am I? And when do I want to retire, for example? Is this money something that I need to use immediately? Or is this something, the money that I can park away for a long period of time? Because the answer to that will all determine what you can invest in. Is this money that I can lose and I'll be fine with it? Or is this money that I really don't want to lose? Again, that will inform your investment decisions. And then once you've clarified those kind of points, then you get into, okay, now I have worked out, I've got 20,000 and I want to get to, let's say, 100,000 in about 10 to 15 years time. Now, how do I go about achieving that given this set of parameters that I've set myself? And for those of you who are looking at me slightly befuddled, thinking, you know what, these are good questions, I've never asked those before myself, and I've forgotten them already, oh my God, what's going to happen? Don't worry, you can go on the website and there's a halal investment checklist that you can download, and it will literally talk you through systematically. You can download it, you can print it out, and you can fill it out. And at the end of it, you will actually have an investment plan that you can use yourself. And there's a section in the book that goes through this as well in a lot of detail. So now that we've actually decided that we want to invest and we've got a bit of a game plan, now we're thinking about actually where we need to put our money. And there's three basic philosophies behind that. The first is we have to be consistent. The second is that we have to diversify. And the final thing is we have to have a long-term mindset. And to bring all of those things together, I'm going to hand over once again to Ziad.
Assalamu alaikum again, brothers and sisters. Have you all heard of the 7 wonders of the world? Has everyone heard of the 7 wonders of the world? Niagara Falls, in Petra. Has anyone heard of Warren Buffett before? Yeah, so Warren Buffett says there's an 8th wonder of the world. Does anyone know what that is? Compounding. Excellent, brother in the red jumper at the front. If we tie into what Ibrahim was saying about how it's very easy to want to get rich quick. See a lot of young brothers in the front row. We always want to get rich fast, want to be rich when we're young. SubhanAllah, in the investing game, in the assets game, if you just take a look at Warren Buffett, who we all know right now, and you look at this chart, it is incredible. Honestly, not incredible because, oh, look how rich this man is. It's incredible because look at numbers, how numbers work. You think it would just be a normal chart, just a straight line. Oh, I invest 10% every year, my chart looks like this. But it's not like this, brothers. You invest 10% every year, your chart looks like this. When you get older, oh my gosh, wow, I've got so much money. I'm going to build another Walsall Aisha Mosque, number 2, because you've got so much capital. The uncles here will be laughing. We have to think forward. We have to think for our children, for our grandchildren. And that is through compounding, patience, sabr, all these terms that we constantly hear. And so how do they compound? How do they compound so well? Well, we're going to show a couple of charts here, how we invest versus how the 1% invest. So typically, you think, oh, how can I make money? I can, can invest with cash into something, can invest in bonds, government, we all heard these terms, bonds. And stocks, everyone says, oh, I want to get rich, I want to invest in the stock market. That's what we hear when a lot of the S&P 500 is, impermissible, but, direct those questions to Ibrahim. But if we look at how the 1% invest, real estate, private equity, hedge funds, are these sorts of things that we typically hear in our communities as we're growing up? Not really. Specifically private equity. You have all these now. Alhamdulillah, we are so lucky. We have, the Ibrahims of the world creating Sharia compliant products. And it's not just Sharia Capital. If you go online, there's so many others. There are halal options for us now. This didn't really exist, 10 to 20 to 30 years ago. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ibrahim. So we have to make the most of this. We have these charts online and, really do look at diversification of the portfolio. You know, and something we miss as well is if the stock market crashes and we have 66% of our investments in the stock market, well, guess what we lose? But if we invest like the 1%, we only have 22% in the stock market because we have diversified our portfolios. You know, we don't always, has anyone heard the term, you don't put all of your eggs in one basket? It's exactly sort of how we should think about our investments. And, you know, if you look at the stock markets, the general trend is always up because of what we mentioned earlier with increased money supply, because of, you know, inflation and all these types of things. The general trend is always up. You, of course, get spikes and troughs and peaks and troughs and the recessions and these types of things. But the general trend is always up. And literally, as I was pulling up here, Ibrahim showed me a stat that if you, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, if you miss 10 days over 5 years or 5,000 days,
The 10 best days.
if you miss the 10 best days, you lose half of the returns. Out of 5 years, if you exit, you know, you get scared because it's gone down a little bit, and you miss the 10 best trading days, you lose half of your portfolio, even if you were in the market for 5 years or 5,000 days. So this is crazy. So it's really important that we understand this, that we teach our children this, not to, you know, panic in our markets. You know, this is the general trend. This is what the data suggests. So now with that, I think Ibrahim is going to talk about wills.
Let's do it. So it's about time spent in the market rather than trying to time the markets, because often the most returns happen in times of volatility. So when people are panicking, and we saw this in April, there was a big spike and a big crash and then a big spike straight up after that, when Trump had his little tiff around tariffs, and then he realized that actually China is quite strong. So when that happened, if you had sold and got panicked and sold there, you'd have missed probably the biggest move there has been over the last couple of years. And so the point is that it's better not to worry about, I'm going to specifically pick when stocks are going to go up and down. Just trust the trend on the long term. Okay, so we're going to pick up the pace because we've got a fair few things to go through still. If you want to get more information about Islamic wills, this is going to be really high level, but there is actually a very detailed seminar that I did that was recorded and is on our YouTube channel that we did at Oldham at the EIC in a few months back. So you can go into a lot more detail over there. The basic punchline is that if you die tomorrow, and we all are going to die, then we need to make sure that our affairs are actually in a way that it's the Sharia that determines what the mirath and what the distribution will be after we pass away. Because the last thing we want is to pass away, and then actually it turns out the very first thing that we are doing in the akhirah is actually sticking to English and Welsh law when it comes to our inheritance. And it's really easy. You can, for those of you who are unmarried or don't have very many assets at the moment, you can go onto our website and you can get a free will. There's actually links that we have to just getting a free will, download it and just do it yourself. That's really easy to do. Then I would recommend for people who get married and might have 1 or 2 kids, in that kind of 20 to 35 kind of range, you can then go ahead and get yourself just a normal Islamic will. We do it, but then lots of other people do it as well, and you can get it done for around £100. That will make sure that your affairs are sorted out, at that level. And then after that, once you get into a little bit more wealth, you might have property, you might have properties, right? At that point, it's worth you probably revisiting, especially if your estate becomes larger than $500,000 or $1 million. That's kind of where you want to revisit it once more. And you might want to just redo the will, or you might want to get a trust-based will, which saves you a lot of inheritance tax. Anyone know what inheritance tax is? What's the rate? 40%. It's crazy, isn't it? So you work all of that time, all of your life, you've been tax dodging, you've not been paying VAT, all left, right, and center, and then you pass away, and then HMRC takes 40% of everything above $500,000. How crazy is that? That's literally what's going to happen if we don't tax plan effectively now. And then I won't go through, some of the other issues, but the one thing to take away is that you can actually donate and decide what you're going to do with up to 1/3 of your wealth. And top tip, you can actually get a free Islamic will done if you go on the Islamic Relief website. So they actually help you provide you a free Islamic will if you want to avail of that service. And in return, they will want, they don't necessarily insist on it, but it's a good practice to give barakah to your will by donating to them as well at the same time. Okay, boycotting. Again, we've done a lot of quite detailed videos and articles on this. The whole idea behind boycotting is what? Any ideas? Why would we boycott? Any thoughts?
The arms companies are being funded by these big companies.
Yeah, brilliant. Any other thoughts? Why would we boycott?
To keep our wealth away being misused.
Yeah, brilliant. Any other thoughts?
Stop certain companies that we don't support their ethics from profiting
Yeah.
and using that money in unethical ways.
Fantastic. Okay, so I think everyone's along the right lines. I would add one key thing on top of that, and that is boycotting is part of a BDS movement. So boycott is actually the first step. The next step after that is divestment, which means pulling investments out of certain things. And the final thing is sanctions, where the state of Israel is sanctioned by other countries or by the United Nations. And if we think back to how South Africa or Rhodesia, how that fell, ultimately it was because of these things. There was mass civil pressure because of boycotting. Then there was people pulling out and not really wanting to engage economically with South Africa. And then eventually there were sanctions. And then the South African government at the time, they decided that we need to sort this out. And it's really vital we understand this, because you and I, actually, the majority of the trade that we have is not necessarily with Israel. Israel's trade is mainly with America, and then also Germany and a little bit of Europe and some Japan in there. It's not necessarily with the Middle Eastern countries or Muslims. So actually the signal aspect of what we're doing is probably more important than any economic harm that we're going to send. Microsoft, Microsoft is a company in the trillions when it comes to its value. Our shareholding in Microsoft might be collectively in the hundreds of millions, which is like 0.03% of Microsoft, something along those lines. So the economic value to Microsoft of Muslims investing or not investing is not actually material. What is really powerful though is if Muslims say that they're, for example, divesting, but then also crucially send the message to Microsoft. That's the key thing. That's the thing that actually changes things. And so actually recently Microsoft have said that they don't want the IDF to be using their software or their databases for certain surveilling activities that they were doing. And that's because of the pressure, right? So the pressure aspect is crucial. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing is simple stuff that I think you and I should all do. So I used to bank with HSBC, and I shifted away from HSBC to Starling, which is another bank. And I would say that for folks who are particularly with HSBC or Barclays, they're the two that are particularly prominent when it comes to boycotting lists. So for day-to-day affairs, I think it would be a good idea to transition over. And I know it's a pain to do that with your current account, but actually it's not too bad if you use the switching service. So it is quite easily possible. And then when it comes to investing, you can use companies like Zoya or Islamic, Zoya or Musaffa is another one, Amal Invest is another one, and they will actually allow you to screen out any BDS listed companies as well. Now, the one note of caution that I would strike here is that we shouldn't go crazy either when it comes to boycotting, because once you start boycotting, you can end up just basically boycotting everything, and then before you know it, you're kind of not able to really function in life. And so it goes back to the key point I started with, which is why are we boycotting? We're not necessarily, we know tactically, we are not going to economically necessarily harm Israel directly. But what we can do is we can target certain key companies and send a message to them, and then that starts the wave of the Norwegian pension fund pulling billions out of these companies. And then that creates the environment where countries like the USA and the UK and the European countries, they actually feel like, you know what, we need to do something. And that's when they start doing the sanctions. And we've already had some symbolic sanctions already on certain people from the settler movement in Israel. But we can, once this pressure continues increases, that can be increased far more. So that's what we're trying to do when it comes to boycotting. We've done a fair few videos on it that you can check out as well. Funnily enough, the video I did, in one day, it went to 600,000 views, and then it's just paused after that. I have no idea why. Okay, main investment options. So we're now going to really quickly whiz you through the kinds of investment options that are out there. So for a diversified, well-balanced portfolio, you essentially have 3 or 4 key ingredients. You have public equities, which is the stock market. So publicly listed larger companies that are quite easy to invest in and out of. And that's often where your pension would be sat. And then you've got real estate, which we all understand, property. And then we've got income generating investment. That could also be real estate. It could also be other types of investments as well. And then finally, we have investing in businesses. So that could be traditional businesses, which is called private equity, or it could be investing in early stage technology businesses, which is called venture capital. So that kind of gives you a spectrum of the 4 different areas, right? So you've got real estate, you've got stocks and shares, you've got property, you've got fixed income, and then you've got businesses, which is private equity and venture capital. And the whole idea is that you need to figure out the right menu for yourself that gives you a balanced portfolio, gives you the right kind of return, but also the right kind of reward and the right kind of risk to achieve your goals. And there is actually, if you go on, I don't think it's on the IFG website, but I think it's on the Curate website, where you can actually take a quiz, and you ask a bunch of questions, you answer a bunch of questions, and it will spit out an indicative portfolio for you. So if you go on, I think the Curate Capital website into the resources section, that's where you will find that quiz. Okay, and this is an example of one way that you might want to make this investment allocation. We've done a fair few, again, articles and videos specifically on this topic. How does someone who is younger differ from someone who is middle-aged to someone who is elderly? The basic idea is someone who is younger can be a lot more aggressive. So they will go for higher risk, higher reward investments. So more of the business kind of investments. Then someone who is in the middle is going to go for a bit of everything. And then someone who is older is going to switch a lot more to the lower risk things like property and income, because that's what they need at that point in their time, in their life. So you have this kind of arc where you take more risk here, and then that comes all the way down, and it goes from growth all the way up to income on the other side, right? So the risk comes down and the income goes up over your lifetime. So here's, and feel free, if people want to, you can take a picture, or we can share it afterwards with the organizers as well. But there's now a plethora of investment options and Islamic finance options available for Muslims in this country and also globally. When it comes to Islamic home finance, there are companies like Strider, there's companies like Gatehouse Bank, Offer, and actually we provide some of the underlying funding to people like Offer and Strider to facilitate this, this home financing. And this is the point I made about pipes. Farida, who saved up money, can invest through Curate to actually get the money over to Khalid, who is now putting down a deposit and buying a house. Our community should be able to invest in ourselves. So anyway, we've got various different home financing options. For those who want to invest in property, we do it, but then also a number of other platforms do it. People like Nesta, Fida is another one, Bayuti is another very new one that has come along. So there's a number of different ways that you can invest into property, or you can do it yourself as well. And I won't go through in a lot of detail about each of these providers, but the gist of this is that you have options and you should take them. And if someone, hands up who has invested before. Okay, hands up who hasn't invested before. Okay, cool. So for those who have invested before, brilliant. For those who haven't invested before, what I would say to you, I know what it feels like. It can be really overwhelming. You've heard all of this information, you're like, oh my God, I don't know what to do anymore. What I would say to you is don't worry about all of this. This is just noise. Pick one of these options. Someone like, let's say, Wahid Invest, or someone like, let's say, Yielders, and just pick that one of those options and say £100, I'm going to make an investment. And then I'm just going to see what happens. Does my money disappear overnight? Does, do I get arrested? What happens? And then after a month or 2 months, you'll realize that, you know what, this investment thing's kind of all right. I mean, I've not become rich, but I've also not lost money. And in that period of time, you have got yourself over the key hump, the emotional, psychological hump of, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. And so that's what if you haven't invested before, please take that and run away with it, because that's the single thing that will actually be a massive unlock for you. It's like driving, I used to live in London, and Ziad is from London, so there's some very aggressive drivers in London, right? And many of them don't even have driving licenses, which is quite scary, which I guess you guys are familiar with in Birmingham and the Walsall region as well, to be fair. But if you're driving, and the first time you learn to drive, you have to get into the car. You have to actually get into that little car park and start moving. The theory of driving is not going to be helpful for anyone. And that's the same thing when it comes to investing as well. For those who are looking to invest slightly larger amounts, unfortunately, because of regulatory reasons, we have to basically set a minimum threshold at £5,000. But for those who want to do that, we've also got the Curate Capital app that allows people to do that. And I'll kind of quickly share with you the whole idea behind it. So I used to be a funds lawyer, and I used to see how people like, Jeff Bezos and the Gates Foundation were making these investments. And you get investments, and then you get the investments that the 1% put their money into, and they're different. And you didn't see very many Muslims there. And the reason why you don't see many Muslims is that, not everyone has £5-10 million to put into something. But what if all of us work together? That was my idea. What if all of us got together, and so then collectively you are actually able to access this stuff, and you can do it in a halal way, and you can do it in a regulated way, and then we can actually be co-investing in the same things that people like, the Gates Foundation or Jeff Bezos or whoever else would be investing in. And this has actually happened multiple times now, alhamdulillah, through things like Curate. We do a whole bunch of things, as I've mentioned, so I won't go through that again. The only thing that we don't do right now is public markets. So stocks and shares, so things like Wahid Invest and Simply Ethical would be good options to look at for that. And then really the last thing that I wanted to leave you folks with, and I think it is probably useful to have a few minutes of questions as well, is if there's nothing else that you take away from this, then take away this. Your wealth is not yours. Your wealth is an amana, it is a trust that is given to you, just like your body is, just like your resources are, just like your parent, just like your entire circumstance. You are lucky, we are lucky to be living in this country. These are an amana, and we are being judged on how we utilize this for the betterment of the ummah and for us to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that applies not just in the masjid, it doesn't apply just in our work, it also applies in our financial affairs. So we need to have that lens constantly in our mind when we're thinking about this stuff, inshallah, in the future. Jazakallahu khairan. Are there any questions?
Jazakallah khair, Ibrahim and Ziyad. We'll take a few public questions, then I think we'll have Adhan. And Ibrahim will be around for a few more minutes after that till Salatul Isha. So, yes, please.
Do we get tax on our investments? How does that work?
Yeah, great question. So the sister's asking, do you get taxed on investments? Unfortunately, death and taxes are the two things that there is a certainty to. But if you're investing through your ISA, which is the individual savings account, you get tax-free £20,000 every single year. And so that means that, yourself, your spouse, your family, everyone has £20,000 tax-free that they can invest. Yeah, exactly. A junior ISA is for children, and they get the same thing, up to about £8,000, I think it is at the moment. And so you can tax-free invest in that, and you can actually become a millionaire through an ISA. So if you invest 20,000 tax-free and you max that out consistently over about 14 years, and the return that you're making is about 7.5%, 8%, do the maths, that would mean that you probably end up becoming a millionaire.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
Yes.
Thanks for this really useful talk. Just two quick questions, if you don't mind. Firstly, a lot of our community seems to invest in crypto because, as you mentioned, they see that as a get-rich-quick scheme. But actually, what I've seen is I've inevitably seen people just lose money. So could you briefly just touch upon how to invest in cryptocurrency and whether we should do it? And just very quickly, second point, with regards to if we do make a portfolio of various options, how do we exit? Because ultimately what people are looking to do is to increase their disposable income. So can you just talk about when and how to exit?
Yeah, great questions. So on cryptocurrencies, sounds like you're a crypto naysayer. Yeah. No, so I think there's some value to crypto, but I think mainly the value is in some of the main Bitcoin, Solana, Ethereum, etc. And I think it's good to have some exposure there, but probably max it out at 5, maybe max 10%. from an Islamic perspective, I actually feel that this is not, this is not me saying it's haram or halal, but my view is that our money should be put into productive things, things that are actually useful for society. And let's be honest, Bitcoin, but also gold and silver, and these kind of investments, my personal view, is this is not useful for society. And so, these may well be good investments, and having 5-10% in these investments is perfectly sensible. But I personally typically try and avoid these investments because I just feel like life is too short, and I would rather have my money doing something useful, and productive. And the second question was around exiting. So that really depends on the kinds of investments you're invested into. So when it comes to stocks and shares, it's quite easy to exit in and out. When it comes to longer term investments, that is going to be dependent on often the fund manager that is managing that. So for example, we own around 40 or so pharmacies in the Northwest under the name of Everest. So at some point we will sell those pharmacies and we'll exit that and we'll give the money back. But what we say is, give us somewhere between 5 and 7 years to do that. So those kind of investments, you're investing into the long term, where you don't have an easy exit out, you should just be aware that this is an illiquid investment and this is the kind of money that I won't easily be able to get out of. So you just need to kind of balance those out with other investments. For example, we've got an income fund that you can give a 3-month notice and you can get the money back. Or you've got the stocks and shares that you can easily get the money back. So you kind of balance between the two of them.
Most of the line, we've had letters to say that we can now get a lump sum out of our pensions. They're not big pensions, they're very small pensions. In fact, we've opted out of some of those because we didn't see the purpose of them. We've both hit 60. We were thinking of investing in property. And I've just found out when you hit 60, it's difficult to get a mortgage. What would you advise?
So I think it's very fact specific. So the kind of questions, and I don't expect you to answer them, but the kind of questions you need to answer is, am I dependent on this pension for my income? Or am I looking to just basically grow this for the future for my kids, etc.? So that's the first thing. Second thing after that would be, what kind of investments am I happy to put my money into? Do I easily want to get this money out within 3 months or 12 months or 2 years? Or am I happy to just lock this up for about 5-10 years and really see it grow? Once you've understood those questions, after that, you're ready to basically figure out where you want to invest. I do actually offer these 10-minute drop-in sessions that anyone can book in on a Friday. You can find the link, I think, on LinkedIn. I think there's a link shared there. So anyone can do that. And then for people who invest through Curate, then we offer these financial coaching sessions where we can talk through for about half an hour with them on these different topics. But it will be tricky for you basically to buy a house. But if you're doing a buy-to-let, sometimes they're okay with it because they will look at the rental value of the property as opposed to your earning potential. So my dad's in his 60s and he recently got a buy-to-let with Strider. And so they were okay with that on the basis, they did look at his salary, but they were okay with it on the basis that it's a rental property, so there will be income coming in. So that could be an option for you to look at.
Please.
Yeah, just a quick question, 2 questions. First of all, are all the platforms regulated and the 85k protection is in place? The reason I ask is I had to use that unfortunately once. Secondly, I've got a real estate background. Real estate platform, whatever you use, do you actually own the asset, and how is the asset guaranteed and protected?
Yes, great questions. So I need to look at the exact, I need to look at all of them, but to the best of my knowledge, all of these platforms are regulated, and we certainly are by the FCA. And in terms of the FSCS protections, so FSCS protections are where the government essentially guarantees your money up to £85,000 per bank account. So for banks, that is applicable. For investments, that is not applicable. So we would not be applicable for that because we're an investment firm. And most of the other investment firms that I mentioned, they would also not benefit from the FSCS protections. But the Islamic banks, they do benefit because they're a bank. When it comes to real estate, we own the real estate directly through an SPV, which is a limited company, and then our investors would come into that and they would own shares into those SPVs. What's that?
There is a director of the limited company.
They wouldn't be a director on the limited company, no. They wouldn't be. We would be the directors. So if you've got, let's say 500 investors, we obviously can't make all of them directors. So that's how we kind of combine everything together for them.
So the asset, so if the limited company goes bust, the capitals are guaranteed, isn't it? Basically.
So the capital is never guaranteed, full stop. So let's say you've got a property and it's making an income. That property, and this is an isolated. I'm not talking about a specific fund here, but I'm talking about the hypothetical scenario you set up. That SPV would own the property.
So I've got a real estate background, so if I went to bought the asset myself, I would personally own the asset, and 100% it's my asset.
Absolutely.
So that's important, and all them
Absolutely.
are regulated. There are regulated platforms out there. Fortunately, I had a company that went bust. I
Okay.
got money back in 3 years, but if it wasn't regulated, I would have lost north of probably 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to highlight these things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All of these firms that we're talking about are regulated firms, and we wouldn't want to be talking about unregulated firms.
When we're investing in funds, we talk about diversification. So one way of investing is in index-linked funds, like FTSE 100 or S&P 500. So how is investing through Curate different to investing in S&P 500?
Yeah, brilliant question. So the S&P 500 is a list of the 500 or so largest companies in the USA. And so we don't deal with publicly listed companies, the stock market. We deal with what is called the private markets. So that's things like real estate, income investments, investing in businesses. So it's a different type of investment entirely from a risk and reward and diversification perspective. If you look at how endowments or these very large institutional investors do it, they would have maybe 30 to 50% allocated to public markets, and then they would have maybe another 30 or so percent allocated to real estate or income, and they would probably have another 20 to 30% allocated to alternatives, basically traditional businesses, hedge funds, crypto, things like this. And so what we are doing is we're bringing the income aspect and the alternatives aspect to the table. The public side, we don't deal with at this moment in time.
We'll take one more question before we finish for Salah. Yes, please.
You've got venture capital and private equity shares. I'm assuming that's you can invest that within your portfolio. Could you share some examples on that? You offer that.
Yeah.
Is it very generous? I think there's tax relief on that. If you applicable in PIS.
That's right. Yeah.
Could you just expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So venture capital is investing in early stage tech businesses. These are high risk, high reward businesses. And so the way we do it is we have a portfolio of 15 or 20 of these early stage businesses. You would expect half of them potentially to fail, the other half to succeed, and some of them to succeed really massively. And so companies that we've invested in include something like Pelago Health, which helped with opioid addictions. We invested when it was about 35 million in value. These days it's about 10 times that value. And there's some other companies that we've exited successfully at 2.5, 3.5, 4.5x. So we've had about 5 or 6 exits. We've had a bunch of duds as well. So the overall portfolio is, that's kind of how it's performing. And then you get up to 50% tax rebate on the amount that you invest. If you invest 10,000 into venture capital, you can actually get back up to £5,000 of that as a tax rebate. So the government basically just give you that money back. And they do that because they want to encourage investment into UK businesses, particularly technology businesses. And then on the private equity side, we own a chain of pharmacies, 40 or so pharmacies up in the northwest. So you're essentially investing in traditional pharmacy businesses that are 90% of the revenue comes from the NHS. And the whole thesis there is that using automation and using robotics and improved software, economies of scale, you can actually basically make this a more profitable operation. And then you look to sell this on for a profit. And then that will come back to investors. So yeah, that's how the two would work.
Thank you, Ibrahim, and we'll reward you for your efforts and your time. We'll draw the question and answer to a close over here. Salah is at 8 o'clock. Ibrahim will be here for a few minutes after that. And most importantly, after Salah, there are some samosas and refreshments as well. If nothing else, please stick around for that as well. Thank you very much for coming. Assalamu alaikum.